Sikh who was assassinated in Canada, the Canadian Sikh who was killed in Canada. Canada has now accused Modi of being behind this. I'm going to explain the whole situation and break this down for you about Hardeep Singh Nijjar, who was actually elected head of his temple in where he lived in British Columbia, and he was killed there in June. And let me show you this clip of Trudeau, basically, just straight up saying, yeah, India did this.
Today I'm rising to inform the House of an extremely serious matter. I just informed the leaders of the opposition directly that I want now to speak with all Canadians. Over the past number of weeks, Canadian security agencies have been actively pursuing credible allegations of a potential link between agents of the government of India and the killing of a Canadian citizen, Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Canada is a rule of law country. The protection of our citizens and defense of our sovereignty are fundamental. Our top priorities have therefore been, one, that our law enforcement and security agencies ensure the continued safety of all Canadians, and two, that all steps be taken to hold perpetrators of this murder to account.
In Canada, you have a large population of Punjab Canadians, right? So almost a million, about 950,000. So that's about 2.6% of Canada's population. And by the way, you have also similarly large Punjab communities in Australia, in New Zealand, in England, and so on. And so some Punjabs who are also Sikh, right? So Sikhism is basically the fifth largest religion in the world. Specifically those who come from the Punjab region, which is located inside Pakistan and inside India, right? It's on the border. Some of them want a separate country for themselves, and they want to name it Khalistan and so on. And Hardeep Singh Nijjar, the man who was assassinated in British Columbia in June, he basically was designated a terrorist by India in 2020. And so the Indian government publicly, had a grudge against him. And now Trudeau it's not just Trudeau, by the way, it's also the Americans who are saying that, Modi ordered the hit, and he sent two agents all the way to British Columbia and Canada to kill this guy. And, they're furious about it. And I mean, look, if this is true, yeah, they should be furious because, obviously you cannot just show up and kill people on anyone's soil, right? And remember the Israelis, when they assassinated a member of Hamas, a senior figure in Hamas in Dubai, they falsified Australian passports, British passports, German passports, all the so-called allied countries. Do you think they did anything? One of the Mossad agents pretended to be a Holocaust, pretended that his grandparents were Holocaust survivors, or Holocaust victims rather, and that he wanted to get German citizenship, right, to claim it back. And it was a complete lie. He just wanted to get the passport so he could go on this mission and assassinate someone. And the Germans actually helped him escape afterwards, gave him to Poland, and then he flew from Poland to, no punishment whatsoever. So I just find it funny that now they take issue in the West with ordering hits on their soil, in their in their presence, because it's India. Well, it's got something to do with BRICS, which I'll get to in a second. But just to give you the background, when we talk about this Khalistan idea of separatism, this is exactly here in the Punjab region, both in India and in Pakistan. Okay, so again, the reason that this is such an issue in India, Sikhs basically make up 2% of India's population. When it comes to the 1980s, okay, you had a military operation against the Golden Temple. Now, when you talk about the Sikh religion, I also, by the way, I hate this one in the news. They keep saying Sikh. It's not Sikh, it's Sikh. Anyway, when you talk about the Golden Temple, this is the holiest site in the Sikh religion. Okay, and so in June 1984, the Indian Prime Minister orders an attack on it, and they completely destroy it. This is a photo of the temple, by the way, the Golden Temple. So you can think how furious people got because of that. And you know what happened as a result? Just a few months later, so remember this was in June 1984, October 1984, Indira Gandhi is assassinated by 2 Sikh bodyguards because of this. This is a very, very big issue in India that never went away, right? Like the scars are still fresh, okay? So that's why the idea of separatism, it's really frowned upon actually as a result. None of the major parties in India support it, even the Sikh ones. That doesn't mean no one supports it. Obviously, Hardeep Singh Nijjar did, right? So a lot of the diaspora, meaning Sikhs who have moved away from India and live in Canada now or in England or whatever, they not all of them, but a lot of them do advocate for it, and they can more openly in those countries, even though India doesn't like it, okay? So, you need to think of this as kind of like how Saudi Arabia or Turkey would behave, right, with dissidents or people that take issue with the government. Like, yeah, they'll actually send someone to carry out a hit. Now, do I personally believe the Indians did it? Yeah, I think they did. If you say that, you'll upset them, because as a result of Trudeau's accusation, they expelled a Canadian diplomat from India, and then Canada did the other thing, right? It's always like this. If country A expels a diplomat from country B, then country B will do the same with a country A diplomat. Yeah, you can see here also another issue in response. So India's foreign ministry, they announced a temporary halt to visa applications for Canadian citizens following Trudeau's accusations that the Indian government killed Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Okay, so they're really angry about this. They're really, really angry about this. And again, I really don't know what to say here, because it does seem like they could have done it. Now, again, before I continue, I'm speculating. It could also be that the Americans did it. Why do I say this? Why the Americans? What do they have to do with any of this? Well, let's say that whether the Indians did it or not is really irrelevant here. I'll tell you why. Because they are using this issue either way to pressure India. Why India? Because India is a member of the BRICS, and BRICS is now, on the rise. It presents a challenge economically and politically to the West. The G20 is an absolute fart of a joke, like an absolute fart. The other week they tried to court the African Union. Like they think, they like to say, 54 countries just joined. No, they didn't. They absolutely did not join the G20. No one cares about the G20. Literally nobody. The G20 is irrelevant. It was actually India hosting it, and you could see the body language between Trudeau and Modi, very tense, not as lovey-dovey as usual, right? So because as Trudeau says himself, that he brought this up and raised this with Modi personally recently, and I can only imagine the G20 being one of those occasions. My point here is that whether the Indians did it or the Americans did it, it doesn't matter, because they are using this to beat India over the head and basically bring it into the fold so that it cannot rise as a major player in BRICS, and that they can use it against China, right? Because India has an issue on the border with China. Now, obviously, these things can be resolved, but when you have these issues, they like to exploit them and make things bigger, right? So they want to make sure that India is basically an in for them into BRICS, and that they can use it against China. This is This is what Erdogan did in Turkey with Saudi Arabia when they had Khashoggi killed. Remember Khashoggi, the journalist? So he was assassinated in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, and Erdogan made a big stink out of it, and he rightfully should have, but he didn't do it because he actually cares about journalists or people being assassinated on his, in Istanbul. He did it because he wasn't happy with Saudi Arabia, and you had a break by this time, or rather a split between Turkey and Qatar, who are Muslim Brotherhood, and Saudi Arabia in relation to the war in Syria, because all of these countries, Turkey, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, were funding various groups in Syria, and they just didn't agree with each other and about the potential gains that they had from meddling in Syria. So you had a split between Qatar, and because Erdogan is Muslim Brotherhood and so is Qatar, he was beating Saudi Arabia over the head. And there are also economic reasons and so on. But this is my point. The Canadian government, the Americans, when they feel like it, of course they can look the other way, but they don't want to look the other way because they don't like how India is progressing in terms of the multipolar world, right? Remember, you cannot just look at this as an isolated thing. You have to think, why does Canada care. Of course, this is a crime. It's horrendous. It's awful. And if a foreign country sanctioned this makes it even bigger. Even more of a scandal. Absolutely, yes. But why? The Canadians and the Americans and the West, they can look the other way when it suits them. Just like I mentioned with the Israeli example. So why do they care so much now that they're raising it to the point where they're willing to have diplomats kicked out? And it's really a giant spat. Trudeau's like getting up in Parliament and announcing this. This is very different. Keep in mind, Trudeau himself said that he raised this with Modi. No diplomats were kicked out, right? No visa applications were halted. This only became an issue when he raised it in Parliament in front of everybody. So the Indians are not happy about being beaten over the head with this, right? And they're being beaten over the head with this because they want to weaken India and control it, right? They don't like, as I said, the fact that BRICS is now expanding from, gone from 5 to 11 members. That India buying Russian oil and reselling it, like crazy. So there are many, many economic reasons for this. And they want India, of course, to be in on their new alternative to the Silk Road, which is getting a trade route that, goes from India into the United Arab Emirates, into Saudi Arabia, into Jordan, into Israel, and onwards into Europe. They need India to be in on this project, right? And India, as I already mentioned, has pre-existing conditions with China regarding the border. So, it's not like India even likes China that much to begin with, but these are the two most populous countries on earth. They are BRICS members. They are economic powerhouses. They need to learn to get along with each other, and they can do, but not when you have, not when you have the West trying to take these issues and expand them and multiply them, which is what they always do, right? They go get involved in somebody else's thing. And make it a much, much bigger issue than it is. So I think this is a very important point. And the fact that it was in the news that the Americans had come to the conclusion the Indians did the hit, that I find this very suspicious. What do the Americans have anything to do with Sikh separatists being assassinated on Canadian soil? Yes, Canada's a neighbor, but do you think the Americans care that much about British Columbia? Why were they talking about this with the Canadians? This for me is a bit weird, Now, of course, there could be nothing to it. Maybe the Canadians just wanted the Americans' help on, to ascertain who was really responsible. It could be nothing, but it's never just nothing in politics, is it? There's always something. So I think this definitely, it's a crime, and it's awful that he was assassinated. And it's even more disgusting that they are using this as a geopolitical tool, like something to hang over India's head, and bring them, into line, basically. So you have to pay attention to that, because right now you have many, many things happening for, many things orchestrated by the West to crush BRICS, to crush the Silk Road, right? You have MBS and Netanyahu announcing this, Israeli-Saudi partnership, this economic corridor. You had Biden with Modi and the G20 being an absolute flop. Many things happening where they're trying to counter the multipolar world, but it's not going to plan. So they resort to things like this. So this whole region, by the way, is actually, it's called Punjab. Okay, just so you know, this whole region here, it's called Punjab. It's the province. And of course, what you guys take a guess? Why is this in two countries? Like, why is this split into Pakistan and into India? Take a guess who split it. Just take a guess. When it became clear that Britain could no longer hold on to its colonies, what our government did is they decided to do what the Americans are doing right now in Syria, which is kind of like, okay, I can't have my way, so I'm going to set everything on fire. So the British version of that was basically allowing the European Zionist militias to take over Palestine, also carving up India, right, into India and Pakistan, and well, Kashmir is another issue now. That's the point. You basically, and even 100 years later, we're almost there. Let's say 80, 70 years later, there's these fights, these issues are still there. And remember, when they carved India and Pakistan up, why did they do this? The idea was that, we're going to make Pakistan a homeland for the Indians who happen to be, or rather the Punjabs who happened to be Muslim, right? So you had a transfer of populations, each one going the other way. Millions of people, in horrendous conditions. Many of them died, and all because of some people, in London, pulling out a map and carving a line, based on what? Based on sectarian issues, which is the same strategy in the Middle East, right? Like, oh, we're gonna have like Arab Christians in here, in a place called Lebanon, right? We're gonna make Syria smaller. We're gonna have this thing called Israel for Zionists, for Jews. It's all sectarian. It's like we're gonna inflame these issues and make sure that people have something to separate them, so we can control them better. It's divide and conquer, like literally on a map. You can see it in your face. Divide and conquer. That's what it's about. So I've been near this border region. Okay. So when I was young, I went to Lahore, and near Lahore on the border, they do a changing of the guard, the Pakistani and the Indian army, and it's really awesome. It's really, really nice. It's very, very famous. It's at the Atari border. Okay, and this is of course, if you just look at the map, right, where this is Lahore, big city in Pakistan, and then here's the Atari border where they do the changing of the guard, and you can see here, what does it say there? This is the Punjab region, right? So right in the same vicinity, right in the vicinity, and it's absolutely beautiful. We'll see where this goes. Right now, it's still an argument on a diplomatic level, but I don't think it's far-fetched to connect it to the new Silk Road, to BRICS and so on. On the contrary, it's so clear what their intentions are with this. You shouldn't think that Canada isn't involved in countering BRICS. On the contrary, remember, Canada is a Five Eyes country. Canada and America and Britain are they're one country. It's one Anglo-Saxon empire, right? From London all the way to to Australia, to New Zealand, with Canada, with America. It's one Anglo-Saxon empire, right? That's why they're the Five Eyes. There's a reason for that. So never put it past them to do this kind of stuff, do Washington's or London's bidding. Of course. In any case, very, very, again, I don't necessarily, support, it's not about supporting Sikh separatism or something like that. Not at all. It's just that I think it's sad that this guy was killed and they use him as like some pawn in this game against India. I think that's what's disgusting, and the Indians, they're right to be angry at the Canadians, especially if they didn't do it.